Kągi turime paskutinį šios dienos kalbėtoją. Jau mūsų konferencijose ZHA Architects pristatė kai kurios savo projektus. Šiandien turime poną Ludovico Lombardi, kuris yra ZHA Architects direktoriaus pavaduotojas. Ir jis vadovauja Šiaurės ir Baltijos regionuose vykdomiems ZHA projektams.
Hello everyone, thanks a lot for having me today. I have a lot of slides, but I know it's been a very long day, so I'll try to go very fast and focus only on the projects that are more relevant. Since we're in Vilnius and we finally have a presence here with possibly some future projects. So the presentation, of course, starts with ZHA and ZHA Architects. We have an international practice. We have offices in Europe and in New York, Beijing, Hong Kong, and hopefully soon other projects in the Nordics and other presence in the Nordic. We work globally, and our experience is varying in a lot of different typologies, ranging from cultural buildings to mixed use, offices, infrastructure, sports, and we try to contribute with our design intention in every sector that surrounds us. We have a good portfolio of cultural projects. I'm not going to go into the details of any of them, but we will see some later on. Residential and hospitalities, education and sports, and then transport. And ZHA started with a very strong tension about composition and about sort of a visionary idea of representation in order to describe space and the complexity of space and the society dwelling in those spaces. For us, every project is a unique opportunity to contribute, not only creating something iconic or something that with its presence can inform the space and the society around it, but also something that can contribute in different ways, either to the immediate context, the local communities, or the user experience. So this sketch was the sketch for the Maxi Museum in Rome. It's a cultural venue. It's a building that sits into an existing context. They're all military barracks. And the whole project is articulated with keeping in mind the user movement, the experience of people into these linear spaces, and the way that the public circulates inside the building. So this idea of these lines that are interweaving each other becomes the interior space driver, but also the composition of the exteriors. We deal with different contexts. This is a project in London. It's an expansion of an heritage building. It's called the Serpentine Sackler Gallery. And we wanted to contribute with something that was a completely juxtaposition of an existing heritage building with something completely new and somehow contrasting yet complementing the language of the context. We deal with a lot of different conditions. This is in New York. It's a recently completed project. It's a residential building. And this building has to deal with the rigidity of the Manhattan grid, which is, of course, a very interesting challenge, yet trying to create something which is dynamic in our own language. So in this case, we use the privacy between the different units to create this balcony articulation and create a playful facade towards the main highline in order to create a more dynamic intervention into the block system of New York. When we talk about context and sustainability, we normally don't only work on environmental sustainability. We also work a lot with what we consider social and economical sustainability, which are two very important aspect of sustainability in general as a direction to strive for. This project is an Olympic pool, so it was done in a very fast track time, very tight budget for the Olympics in London. But when we designed it, we always had to keep in mind that the Olympic Games are a very short time sort of span compared to the investment, and the pool was going to remain afterwards. So how can we design a building that we can work in the Olympic mode for a very limited time, but also can work afterwards as a community pool. I mean, this is now open to public. You pay, I think, €2.50 to go in and swim. And it's one of the most successful venues of the Stratford area where the Olympics were taking place. And the only way we managed to consider that, to make a smaller, more intimate experience for schools and community around the area, was to be able to engineer a roof system that's standing only on 2 points. So you can detach and reattach the facade and add extra seatings when it's needed for big events, or otherwise bring back the facade and make a more intimate experience, which is more of a human scale. So of course, the Olympic sort of brief was not really targeted to the legacy mode, but as designer, we have the responsibility when you are building such a venue with such an investment from different stakeholders to also think about how it's socially sustainable in the long run. Another aspect of our office is definitely the research part. So when we design any sort of building, we want to make sure that what we design, what we sketch, is actually buildable. And it's the end result has the same quality of the initial ideas that we put into the project. So this is a project in Baku. The brief said to create 3 different buildings. And what we wanted to do was instead maximize the open public landscape around it and concentrate the function in one single building, which is articulated in 3 waves. It's a very distinct sort of design, and it might look relatively complex, but in reality, this is a very simple structural system, which is a space frame that is used for a normal industrial shed with a rain screen in metal. And what we do, because we know that what we design needs to be rationalized, needs to be make sure that it's buildable in different contexts and in different regions, we actually take ourselves the responsibility to going through a lot of detailing, of processing, of rationalization, buildability studies, talking to suppliers, talking to specialists, in order to make sure that our sketch is actually going to be built within the given final results. And we always strive to make something out of the different challenges of every project, something new. And something spectacular. This is a project we completed in Beijing for Lisa. ZHA China is the client, is our current client of us. And this project is the tallest atrium built to date for a high-rise building. The reason why we have this atrium in the middle is actually because underneath there is a metro line going through. So structurally, it was not impossible to create a central core system. We had to create a double core system, basically 2 independent towers, and then we wrapped them around with a single facade. The facade, again, it looks like a very sort of articulated facade, but it's all completed with flat panels. And inside, you have these amazing, I mean, those are actually pictures from the building. You have actually this amazing sort of effect of the spiraling atrium, which is technically the two facade of the 2 towers. So what we did was try to take the challenge of the project and make it into the design feature in order to create something unique and spectacular that can really become a new identity for the place around it. Again, different complete challenge. This is in Antwerp, heritage building. The brief said you cannot do any structures inside the building, you cannot touch it. So what we did was participate in a competition with this crazy idea of creating a diamond on top of the existing Port Authority building. And the structural challenge is that you only have 2 legs, one inside the courtyard and one outside. And the building is completely detached. So we renovated the existing building, doubled the office areas, and this allowed us to create something spectacular. And I have to say, we are very happy because this project was definitely a very sort of flamboyant project, if you want. It was definitely not a subtle intervention, but it was something that now is part of the identity of Antwerp as a city. So when you come from the water, you see this beautiful diamond kind of reflecting on the waterfront. There is no other building around. And now the city itself recognize, and the people of Antwerp really recognize themselves into this project. So it really helps to kind of create a new identity, a new vision for the community of Antwerp, not only for the client itself that of course wanted to have double the square meters of offices. Talking about getting closer to the Baltics. I'm personally responsible for all the projects we're doing in the Nordics, so Scandinavia, Finland, and the Baltic region, let's say. This is a project we have in Oslo. It's a metro station. It's quite an interesting project because it talks a lot about, we have 2 stations in Oslo. This is one of them. But it talks about try to bring underground some of the sort of reference ideas that makes people comfortable being in a closed environment. The inspiration was clearly the sort of the landscape nature, the formation of the surrounding of the beautiful landscape of Norway, with the fjords, the crevasse, with this kind of vaulted glacier ceilings and a sort of sculpted, more stone-inspired entrance. And those are some of the views of the let's say the stone entrance, as we call it, the landscape crevasse, and then the station itself. And this project is actually on site. The excavation has started. There is a lot of course, infrastructure work to be done. It's 6 new metro stations, so it's a lot of like tunneling to be done. There is a strong rock formation in Norway, so it's a very sort of heavy machining happening on site. And this is the site of the station. And to date, apparently, is the biggest site ever excavated in Norway. So we are, of course, proud to always try to get all the records in. But we also try to somehow look at other opportunities in the region. We started 4 or 5 years ago, looking very actively in Scandinavia and then the Baltics. This is one of the competitions we did in Oslo for the Photography Museum. And I think this project is interesting for me because it talks a bit about context, but also talks a lot about the material research we're doing. We have a unit that does research on sustainability, materiality, and material research to achieve sustainability goals. In Finland, we just submitted a competition for a ferry terminal in Turku, and now going closer to the Baltics, and I'll come back to the issue of research and materials. The first project we did in the Baltics was actually the Tallinn port. So we won the competition for a big master plan for the port of Tallinn. And you can see that it's actually a very big area. It's 50 hectares of sort of projects. The old city, you can see it on the bottom left of the screen. And the real issue of the client, the Port Authority, was how do we bring the city back to the waterfront? And how do we actually bring the water back to the city line? Because the port itself is a big concrete slab without real activation. So we had to propose a vision, we had to do economic study in terms of programs, we have economic consultants to make sure that this was viable. And now that it's actually completed, the Port Authority is with the city of Tallinn doing the detailed plan of 4 or 5 different areas that they split the project in. But the whole idea of this project was about trying to create a continuous waterfront that was completely accessible as a sort of a continuous path for people to use without having to interfere with the logistic of the harbor. So it was all about pedestrian flows, bicycle flows, about trying to bring programs that would activate the edge slowly to bring the city and the people into the site, which is now, of course, a sort of a no man's land, apart from when you have ferries coming in and out from Helsinki. So the whole idea was a spine, what we call the activation spine, or sort of the pedestrian spine. So this is a continuous and uninterrupted system of circulation, and like a high line, let's say, that you have in Manhattan, but done, of course, on the scale of the waterfront of Tallinn. And I think it's been very well received, and it's something that is slowly taking place. Of course, the vision is for 2035. So it's actually slowly being completed. I already started the detail plan for the area on the left that you see on the screen, and now they're submitting the second area, and the third one is the top right that you see there. So this project somehow introduced us in an interesting way to other opportunities in the Baltics. As you know, we're tendering now for the Rail Baltic station in Tallinn. It's quite a complex project. There is an underground passage. We wanted the station to act as a bridge. There is new lines of high speed that are coming all the way down to Kaunas, Vilnius, and then of course all the way to Warsaw. And it's a very interesting project because it not only is an infrastructure project and not only is a project that allows a different way of movement, a more sustainable way of moving through different countries, bringing together in much shorter time not only people but also goods travels, and there is a lot of interesting social aspect to it. But also it's important to see that transport-oriented projects have a chance to really trigger a wider redevelopment of the area. So by working on this project now, there is a lot of new development coming around that are really picking up and upgrading, uplifting, let's say, the sort of the local context. So transport development are really interesting projects because not only they fulfill their own initial function, but they have the possibility to really uplift a wider context to it. So this project is a bridge station. There is an underground passage that you see over here, and our attention was really to try to create a continuous open flow between two different sides of the station, which is something that is recurrent, and you see it later also in what we're proposing for Vilnius. Of course, it's been a long process. There is a lot of implementation and rationalization, but as I said, we are in the tendering stage as we speak. So this project is going to start construction relatively soon. And it's a sort of the first station, in a way, on the long line. I'm waiting for Helsinki to start tunneling, but so far Tallinn would be the first station of the Rail Baltic line. And the whole idea is that you have natural light guiding the people throughout the station. So it's a very, very interesting, immediate way to navigate space. If you use the spatial design of this and the quality of the space to guide people, is a really, really important way to kind of implement a standard wayfinding strategy. So that's why we want to really play with these kind of linear elements, natural light, visibility towards the side, and those are some of the shots of some of the interior space. And it's all about phasing. It's all about, those are infrastructure projects. It's a very interesting headache of sort of BIM modeling, coordination with different stakeholders and partners. Everything is done basically in 3D, and it's one of somehow what was mentioned and presented much better than me prior, but it is something that within our company we really strive to be on the front of the research on the way that we can deliver project paperless in 3D, where the coordination is live with all the different partners involved in the project. So I think this is something that we're definitely bringing on board with a lot of different BIM requirements, quality control checks, to make sure that the project is sound and is actually buildable, and we are actually using the 3D model for tender process as well. So those are somehow a bit more of a boring side of the project, but I think it's really one of the parts that is coming more and more prominent in our practice as one of our digital research. The research I was mentioning before in Oslo, when we started looking at timber construction, it's something that we really want to, we have in our DNA. We always push the boundaries of architecture, try to do something that is not only spectacular, uplifting, but also something that pushes the boundaries of technologies and research. This project is a proposal we did for Riga. It's a competition, unfortunately, we lost. But I think it was very interesting because it was talking about use of timber construction, the way we implement that in our projects, how do we deal with different sort of constraints of it. There was an existing building, there is of course a series of pots that are repeating one another, and we try to variate that change in materiality by trying to keep the same sort of idea throughout the project. And you get to see some of this idea of mass timber constructions that are becoming more and more recurrent in our projects. Then we come finally to Vilnius. We did participate in a competition, we didn't win, and it was for the Radvila Palace. It's a really nice area. It's really nice and lively, especially at night. So it was a very interesting brief, and we really wanted to try to create something to somehow contribute to what is now a sort of an in-between space. It looks like a bit of an unutilized or a missed opportunity. So the competition was for an expansion of the existing palace, well, the remaining of the existing palace, rebuilding somehow the symmetrical presence of the original volumetric of the building. So what we did was trying to work with something relatively neutral, this idea of these kind of scoops that gently kind of bring the volumes down to the ground, having a sunken plaza to lower the traffic and free the ground floor for possible new activations, and then try to have this idea of a vertical circulation, almost like a core, but it's like an empty core with only circulation to distribute the flows on the different sides. So this was the idea of the sunken plaza I was mentioning before, trying to kind of rebalance the volume of the existing building with a new extension or rebuild volume, let's say, because it was very true to the original one. And then another opportunity that came up in Vilnius is the Business Stadium Center. So we're working now on the development for a new mixed-use building. Of course, it's inspired also by the presence of the Brutalist building that is fronting that. And I think it's very interesting because this idea is a very strong gesture, and we wanted to bring the same attention of this kind of very gentle curve but sharp and into the design of the facade. Somehow lifting, so talking to that building, but not necessarily just mimicking it. Just trying to use that in a different way so that you could relate, but yet not so immediately. So there is always a bit of discovery, and you realize you see the similarity, but it's not obvious. So this project, of course, it's a process as well. We're now looking at, of course, working on the best way forward in order to strategizing on the programs, the different type of use and mixed use. There is a little offering on the site. But let's say that's the idea for the project itself. And then if we go to finally what we're doing for Vilnius Connect, this was a project that we had really dear. As I said, I think infrastructure projects are very interesting because they're a lot more than just a way of moving and a lot more than just a transportation solution. It's really something that affects the way people relate to different contexts, to different areas, to different communities, to different nations. So they have a very strong impact in the way that this can activate the context immediately, but also the relationship with the different and far away places. And of course, it's a lot more sustainable than not just driving car through. So the whole idea of this project was about, there is an heritage station, the existing building, which is the shape that you kind of see on the left. And what we wanted to do was really respect that, take that and start extruding them and morphing that to create a new sort of entry point on the opposite side of the rail tracks. And this idea, this gesture, somehow is used also on the two elevations on the side in order to give maximum visibility on the tracks. And it's somehow it is a literal way of answering to, okay, we have an existing building, there are protected views and heights, how do we deal with that? But it's a playful way to take that and make it somehow one of the drivers of the design of the station, of the new station terminal. As I said, we are doing the Tallinn one, and now we finally got through most of the bureaucracy for the Vilnius station. So this is slowly taking momentum, and I think that our main goal was to really try to not only fulfill the initial brief, but try to give something that was contributing, as I said, to a lot more than just the station function itself. So there is a series of components. Of course, there is an existing rail track. So what we wanted to do was to create something, again, that has a similar language. So there is a coherence when you move through the space and you perceive the space. So when you see the bus terminal, you start recognizing that is a language that somehow is talking to the new station language, but it's not directly the same. So you want to kind of give hint and suggestions to the users, but you also want to create diversity. So the bus terminal is oriented as an extension of the square, because originally, actually, when the square fronting the station was designed, it was symmetrical on both sides of the axis of the station. Now there is, of course, the existing bus terminal, and the new bus terminal was somehow an extra element eating into the public space. So what we decided to do was to scoop inside and try to lift and bring the landscape on the roof of the bus terminal in order to maximize the area used for the square. as I said, the idea of the station somehow talks a bit with that, because you're taking the roof of the existing station and then you're morphing that into the two elevations and then inverting it to create the exit on the opposite side. And this gives quite a good opportunity with a simple gesture to really create focal points on the tracks, on the new station entrance, and then on the existing one. There is a lot of complexity to this project. There is the idea that this station is going to have an open passage for the public to be able to cross the rail even when the station is closed. So that was very important to us that the station itself is also acting as a bridge for the public, so that you can really relink together the two sides that are somehow cut through by the trench of the tracks at the moment. So that was a very important point. And then the other point was, of course, try to free and rationalize the circulation on the existing square that you see on top, in front of the station, existing station building. So these two sort of main driver somehow started distributing and talking to the whole organization of the space. Oops. So you can see here that's somehow a context in place. You can read the bus terminal with this idea of the square that lifts up and becomes the roof. Clearly a revitalized existing public landscape square. The new station and the way it kind of bridges in a very straightforward way the tracks area, and then the new station on the south. And then there is a proposal for master plan that is, of course, just a guideline to give an idea of the different possible development that could happen in the surrounding. We do a lot of material research. We do a lot of sustainability research. So in-house we have environmental sustainability research, and of course this is something that we are bringing into the projects from the beginning in order to make sure that we have an approach that is not only complying with what are the current standards, but an approach that is also somehow making an extra step to really become a benchmark for sustainability, design qualities, and a lot of other different functions. This is one of the slides showing somehow the relationship between the axis of the central axis and what I was talking about before, that the fact there is a bit of an imbalance and asymmetry, and we try to really create a new square on top of the bus terminal roof instead of cutting back more and more this public offering. I think that we work with Land, which is a Italian landscape architect. We work with them in a variety of projects. I think they're really good because they really understood the sensibility of the site and the idea that you had to somehow really strive to create something that was a continuous surface, something that could be almost understood as a shared surface, so that the car almost can disappear in between a continuous public landscape. And we really like the idea of this linearity that they used in the project, because that somehow is really giving directionality from the sort of setting out of the stone pavings all the way to the planting system. And somehow really is interesting because then it crosses with the tracks, but at the same time it really creates a more legible grid and circulation path on the floor. And this is the image of the bicycle lane and the sort of bridge walkway, which is outside the station and is really thought to be 24/7 active. I mean, I think it's very important that this bridge is not only functioning as a station, but really function as a public bridge for people to use and commute from one side to the other of the site. And inside, we try to bring in our research on timber construction, different type of solution for CLT structures, and of course this is a station, so it has its own complexity. There is a lot of requirements of bomb blasting, fireproofing. So the whole idea was to go with a very sort of solid base, so like a concrete sort of block in the base, steel constructions, and then the timber was actually for the level of the concourse and above. So there is, of course, a lot of constraints, a lot more than not in a standard building, but it is something that we are pushing also in other stations and infrastructure projects, and I think that the legislation is actually coming more and more towards the possibility to use timber construction also in big infrastructure projects. I mean, those are some of the details that I was talking about. So of course there needs to be a sort of very strong concrete solution for the platform and the sort of vertical circulations, because that has a lot of requirements for train. Well, I'm not going to bore you with that. For a train that might hit the structure, so it needs to sustain a lot of impact, and of course timber wouldn't be an option in that case. Then we have a steel deck in order to get as much as possible with the sort of the span column free as much as we can, sitting on top of this core, and then we have the timber structured that sits, and then the steel connection for the roof. In terms of program, there is a double deck on the concourse, and I think it's again, it's part of the offering that is somehow it's a plus. When you have this kind of eye looking towards the track lines, so you can actually wait for your train, see and look down, and you have this experience of being visually connected to the track. We also want to create this idea of multiplying the offering for food and beverage, waiting areas. So we have this double sort of program, like a mezzanine level. But the whole idea is that there is a central, again, tunnel view from the existing station to the new sort of entry that is completely free of columns and completely visible. And I think that would be definitely a challenge in terms of structure, but it also will be a very important aspect of the project. Those are some of the interior views for the bus terminal. The bus terminal has of course, quite a complex level issues, because the right side where you see the bus sort of parked is a lot lower. The whole square is kind of sloping. So there is quite a few coordination in terms of levels that needs to be done to get access on both sides. But I think that it's something that really would help if we try to uplift the landscape all the way to the roof. And actually I think maybe we're out of time, I don't know, but otherwise I'll just leave you with some of the new last images on the projects. We're really happy to finally have a chance to start talking with the clients about this amazing opportunity in Vilnius. So thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you.